like to thank everyone for coming this morning. We've got Larry Dapsis here from the County Extension to talk about some ticks. So without further ado, here's Larry.
All right, great, Jeremiah. Thank you. Good morning, guys. What a bright-eyed group. Well, I came here from Barnstable. I'm glad you didn't schedule this during the summer because it's only 20 miles, but it took me an hour even during the winter to get here. So how have you guys been holding up during this brutally harsh winter that we've had here on the Cape? Terrible, terrible, terrible. Well, the weather is something. There's a television station, Lower Cape TV is here, and that's one of the things that they want to discuss with me in an interview after this engagement, is what's been the impact of the weather this year on the tick population. There's a lot of misconceptions that about weather and ticks. The minute we get a very hard freeze, and we've had some periods of cold activity, like in the teens, even maybe single digits in some places. I live off Cape, and yeah, we've had some, mornings of, 4 or 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And the perception is that once you get periods of weather like that, it must have killed off a bunch of the ticks. And people kind of connect what happens with mosquitoes. You get the first hard frost, mosquito season is done. Well, tick season, it goes from January 1st to December 31st, okay? That is the long and short of it. So, especially with this mild weather, ticks don't die, even when exposed to very cold conditions. When I was in the cranberry industry with Ocean Spray, I spent 24 years traveling to Wisconsin. And Wisconsin, they have real winters. 25 below zero for extended periods of time is not that unusual out there. And in Wisconsin, ticks are very healthy, deer ticks, and Wisconsin's quite endemic for Lyme disease. And the reason for this is pretty interesting. Ticks synthesize a chemical called glycerol. Well, what's glycerol? Well, glycerol is antifreeze, so that prevents ice crystal formation in cells and protects those little buggers. So what happens during very cold periods is the ticks just become dormant, okay? They get blanketed in snow, yeah, they're not active. But the minute you get temperatures above freezing and a break in that snow cover, you have tick activity. In fact, this has been one of the best Februaries probably on record for tick activity. And what I use to verify that is my phone. People calling in shock that, they're out there and they come back or their pet has ticks all over them. I say, don't be surprised. That's what happens here. I also look at this, I have a group of colleagues at UMass Amherst, and they do tick testing, and that's something we'll talk about in a few minutes. And they told me that this month they're testing 2 or 3 times more ticks per day than they're used to historically. So that just tells me, yeah, a lot of tick activity out there. So could I get some help from a couple of you? I want to hand out some things. Well, I've got 2 items. Great, thank you.
2 different ones here?
Yep, those are the same.
They're the same, okay.
So this is a great opportunity to talk to you guys because I can even tell by the way you're dressed that you're in harm's way probably on a daily basis for tick bite exposure risk. And we want to do things to help you take that exposure risk down. I don't know if I can help you take it down to 0, but I know based on my experience in the past 8 years being in County Extension, we can drop that down considerably. So there's 2 items that you've been handed out. This is our RAC card, the one that says 1 bite can change your life. It has a lot of good bulleted information that we'll kind of talk to, and it has my contact information on the back. The other thing that says tick report at the top, That is from the Laboratory of Medical Zoology at UMass, and that's the group of people that does the tick testing service. And on the back of these cards, they've got their own little tick ID tool, this translucent plastic card, like a credit card size. So that's how I want to start out this, is looking at the little plastic card or our rack card. Let's talk about, thank you very much. Let's talk about the different players that you guys have been encountering. One of them that's very common is the good old American dog tick. And there's a couple baby boomers in this audience. And when we were kids, this was the only tick we had growing up. We didn't have deer ticks and Lyme disease. Yeah, right, sir? Yeah, just dog ticks. And that's a good thing for me, the way I spent my youth, running around the woods, around the swamps, and in the meadows. If we had deer ticks and Lyme disease up in Worcester, I would have gotten Lyme disease about 50 times, and we'd be having this discussion through a Ouija board, okay? Dog ticks are very common on the Cape, and they're more annoying than a true public health threat. They can transmit the bugs that cause Rocky Mountain spotted fever and tularemia. Both of those can be very serious. But here on the Cape or in Massachusetts in general, those two diseases are very rare. You like my tie? Am I overdressed? No, this is actually a gift. There was a person who came to, I think, his fourth workshop. He's a groupie of mine. And he gave this to me as a gift at the last workshop he was at. Now, those two diseases are pretty rare, but I think 3 years ago we did have one case of Rocky Mountain spotted fever. A 10-year-old girl in Brewster came down with it. Fortunately, she was correctly diagnosed, which is a tall order for a rare disease. It's hard enough to get a good diagnosis for Lyme disease, even here on Cape Cod. But she was medevaced to Boston, treated, and came through it successfully. So in response, we decided to do an evaluation of the dog tick on the Cape Cod. And we tested a couple hundred of them, and we didn't have a positive detect for either one of those pathogens. So they're out there, but they're at a very, very low level. The next one I want to chat about is that one with the white spot, the Lone Star tick. How many of you guys have heard about this thing? Yeah, that's the new tick in town. This thing has been moving north steadily for a number of years. And up until about 8 years ago, the northernmost established populations we knew of were on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. And this movement is thought to be a function of climate change. We're seeing plants and animals in places we never used to see them before. And so 8 years ago, shortly after I was hired, the staff at Sandy Neck Beach Park called me out. They were seeing a tick they didn't recognize. They certainly knew what a dog tick was, and everybody knows what a deer tick looks like. And that's a 6-mile-long peninsula. And I sampled out there, and I found Lone Star ticks from one end of that place to the other. They own that piece of real estate. So we're pretty sure that migratory birds introduced them to Sandy Neck. And with photographic evidence, I'm pretty convinced there are animals on the ground that are moving these things around. One of their favorite hosts are wild turkeys. And we have a couple of those here on Cape, right? Yeah. When they were first describing the Lone Star tick, they almost named it the turkey tick because that is the preferred host. Now, this is a very different tick than you might be used to. I don't know if you've ever encountered them. We have found them here in Falmouth, found them on the Shining Sea Bike Trail. There was a woman who ended up getting 182 Lone Star tick bites. They swarmed her. And they do that. They are aggressive. Okay, it's not my phone. They have excellent vision, and they can run. And they can run with the speed of a spider. If they see you from like 20 feet away, they're going to come rolling at you like a little Ferrari, and they won't stop their pursuit. And they have their own unique diseases. They don't carry the bug that causes Lyme disease, but they can transmit bugs that cause ehrlichiosis and tularemia, but we haven't found those pathogens in the tick population as yet, and they haven't had any cases of those two diseases here on the Cape. But we have found ticks infected with stari, which it's a type of rash disease with flu-like symptoms. We have found that pathogen, and Cape Cod Hospital and Falmouth Hospital, they have diagnosed and treated people for stari. But the real game changer with Lone Star tick is the bite of a Lone Star tick can trigger an allergy to red meat consumption, okay? And it can be mild as hives, but go all the way to anaphylactic shock. And I know we've had cases of that red meat allergy here on Cape Cod. Any questions about Lone Star? I mean, feel free to take questions as we go. What an enthusiastic but somewhat reserved crowd. Oh, they're awake. I can tell they're awake. All right, deer tick. We all call it the deer tick. The more accurate name for this tick is really the black-legged tick, because it's not just associated with deer and mice, okay? This thing has been documented to feed on 125 different vertebrate hosts. So it's not just about deer, it's not just about mice. This is a really complex ecosystem, and there's a cajillion moving parts. Now, tick populations, deer are part of the equation. They supply blood meal, and that's what the female tick needs to develop and lay her eggs. But rodents are important too, but a lot of people don't think about vegetation. Believe it or not, the size of the tick population that's out there this summer, that when the nymph stage are out there, that size of that population is really based on the size of the acorn crop 2 years ago, okay? So acorns kind of fuel this whole ecosystem, and there's a lot of other animals that participate in this. Now you see a different range of sizes of these things on the card, okay? These show the actual sizes of the different life stages of these 3 species of ticks. So those tick larvae, those appear during the summer months for all 3 species, and they can be annoying because generally when the eggs hatch, you have these very high concentrations of larval ticks. Now the dog ticks and deer ticks, they're not bothersome. You might get a gray patch that might see on your ankle or your hand if you bend down into a leaf litter. But those Lone Star tick larvae, yeah, they can swarm you, and you can get 200 or 300 bites in a few minutes. And they will burn and itch for 4 to 6 weeks, even if you treat them with something like cortisone, okay? So they're nasty. They don't transmit disease. Now, those nymph stage size ticks, if you look at the deer tick specifically, that little sucker's the size of a poppy seed, okay? So they can elude a tick check, and that's something you should be doing every single day when you come in from an outdoor activity. 2 things, tick check, throw your clothes in the dryer for 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes in the dryer is enough to kill any ticks that are on there. There are recommendations about putting them in a hot wash cycle, but research has actually shown ticks can survive going through a whole wash cycle. The only thing that happens to them is they come out nice and shiny before you put them in the dryer and kill them, all right? Let me grab my coffee here. I'm still waking up too. So those nymph stage of the deer tick, they are out during the summer months. We start seeing them during May, and they're with us into August, into September. And the stage of that stage is significant because that causes 85% of all tick-borne diseases. So we have to be careful all year long, but we have to really be on our game during the summer months. And if there's parents here, one of the things I emphasize is that kids age 5 to 9 have the highest incidence rate of Lyme disease in the state. So everything we've been doing up to this point in time is not good enough. And so I'm going to talk about some strategies that you might want to incorporate into yourselves, but for your children as well, or your grandkids, because it's important. All right. In the event that you do get a tick bite, and I do get calls from people about tick removal, and generally it's because there's one attached to them, or their spouse, or their kid, or their pet, and oftentimes people have their own idea about how to remove a tick, and they kind of want me to validate it. So people ask me about the Vaseline technique, or the dish detergent, or what do I think about the flaming match trick? I don't know who the hell came up with that one. I'll try and watch my language since I know this is on television. In the event that you do get a tick attached to you, what you should have on hand are pointy tweezers, okay? Now, there's a myth out there that's circulating, and with social media, bad information goes fast and far. That if you have blunt tweezers, and because people might not have the pointy kind, but blunt tweezers will work. You have to be careful. But the myth that's out there is that if you crush that tick, the tick becomes a hypodermic needle, and you're going to mainline bad stuff into your blood. Well, tick plumbing does not work like that. Tick plumbing is one way, okay? So that basically if you crush that tick, you're not going to inject yourself with pathogens. That's just not going to happen. But if you break that tick, you rupture it, you just might get a nasty infection at the point where it was attached. Now, there's another device that's recently came out on the market. I'll toss this to you and you can pass that around. That's a product called Tick Ease. And I know the inventor, Dan Wolf, who came up with this design. And it's a two-for-one tool. On one end, it's a flat plate with that groove, kind of like a tick key. But tick keys, as they're currently designed, that V-shaped groove device, they're not that efficient. And I've seen video that they're not good at removing nymph stage deer ticks. Well, this has a groove structure on one, but it's at a 45-degree angle. And I never thought much about it until I tried it. I was collecting deer ticks for the lab at UMass, so I was camped out at deer check-in stations for a few days. What a lovely experience, taking ticks off deer carcasses for a few mornings in a row. So that works pretty well. But for those nymph stage ticks, the other end is something that's really pointy and also at an angle. So the best way to remove a tick is you just grab that tick by the head as close to your skin as you can get, and you do not have to pretend to be Arnold Schwarzenegger and rip that sucker out. Just gentle, straight upward pressure, and it will pop. Now, if you see something left behind, that's when it's 911, call Larry. People are in a panic. Some people are practically sobbing. Larry, the head's embedded in there. Do I have to go to the ER? And it's not, ticks physically can't get their heads into you, okay? It doesn't work like that. The only part that gets into you, they have a long beak. This works, pretty good prop, huh? Not my idea initially. But that's the only part that's in you. The pathogens are in the tick's salivary glands, okay? So once this part breaks away, it's no worse than a wood splinter, okay? Just hit it with a little Neosporin and it's gonna dissolve. So I've been recommending for the last 8 years, and I ask people, did you save your tick? And what do you think most people have been doing with their ticks? Survey says the flush. That is the #1 answer. But I've had a surprising number of people tell me, Larry, I put that thing in the microwave oven until it exploded. So yeah, people take this stuff very personally. The reason for saving that tick is that is evidence. Like we do with our research ticks, you can send that tick to UMass Amherst and get it analyzed to see what pathogens you were potentially exposed to. So we've been managing a program for several years now, Send a Tick to College, okay? And I've personally sent over 3,000 ticks to college, okay, as part of my research, surveillance research. And we received a grant from Cape Cod Healthcare several years in a row. And normally a full panel DNA test that'll pick up Lyme, babesiosis, anaplasmosis, and relapsing fever is $50, which is still a pretty good value for the data you're getting. With this subsidy that Cape Cod Healthcare provided, it knocked that down for Cape residents to $15. So our grant monies ran out at one point, and then Mass Department of Public Health stepped up to the plate. They put a bunch of money out at the lab, and then it was $15 for everybody in the state, and that's the way it is right now. And you go to tickreport.com, you plug in, you know, your zip code, and it'll generate a work order. And you send that, you just put that tick in a Ziploc plastic bag, send it to UMass. Once they get it, you're going to get your tick report in 3 business days or less, guaranteed. And unlike human blood tests for Lyme disease, which is unreliable, you can get false positive, you can get false negatives, this tick test is 99.9% accurate. So it also gives you an estimate of feeding state. You know, was it, you know, not fed? Was it partially fed? Was it fully engorged? Because those ticks might be on you for 4 or 5 days before they're completely done feeding. And so we have a, a rule of thumb in disease transmission. If the tick is on you for less than 24 hours, the risk of transmission is low. It's not 0, but it's low. And after 24 hours, the risk of transmission ramps up considerably, okay? And so the other thing that we see with this, and the game changer here is the 5th disease that we found in the tick populations about 4 years ago now, Powassan virus. So the transmission time for Powassan virus is 15 minutes, okay? And we've had 2 fatalities associated with Powassan virus here on the Cape, one in Sandwich and one in Falmouth. There was a person who worked at that Estewin Research Center, and it just went sideways for him, unfortunately. So the tick testing is something that we recommend. Now, at the current burn rate, and the fact that with the mild weather, they're analyzing way more ticks per week than they have historically. At the current burn rate, they're going to run out of money probably mid-April, which we're looking at saying that's not a good thing, okay? So we're expecting them to open discussions with Katie Brown at Mass Department of Public Health. She's now the head epidemiologist, as well as being our state veterinarian. And hopefully they're going to negotiate something with her. I know Katie does see the value in this program, the type of data that people are getting. Worst case scenario, we go back to a $50 fee for the tick test. But the other value in the tick test is that not only do you get the exposure risk for something like Lyme, but we're seeing a fair number of ticks that are co-infected. They're packing 2, 3, sometimes even 4 different pathogens. And you can come down with more than one of these diseases at the same time. So for you as a patient, this test is valuable in that you now have hard data, all right? It's irrefutable. It's what you were potentially exposed to. And so you can show it to your doctor, because in my experience with these tick-borne diseases, you have to be your strongest self-advocate, okay? It's difficult to go into a doctor's office and get an accurate diagnosis. I mean, Lyme disease is the most misdiagnosed infectious disease on the books because it looks like other diseases. So it can be very confusing to a doctor because you can't rely solely upon the test for something like Lyme. So for you, it's hard data. For the doctor, if they're willing to look at this with an open mind, looking at what you were potentially exposed to and maybe even 1 or 2 pathogens it gives them an idea of the type of symptoms they should be looking at in the clinical presentation of their patient. And I know that there are some doctors now that are not starting a course of treatment until they see the tick report. And that's progress, okay? Because when we introduced this tick test to the medical community at a physician's forum, they were kind of lukewarm on the whole thing. Because the ruling body on this, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, their position is don't bother testing the tick. It doesn't mean you're going to get sick. Well, duh, we know that, okay? But showing exposure risk, we think, is something that's good. So the CDC, they have a long way to come to be more effective. I mean, as a federal agency goes, they underwhelm me continuously. So, tick testing. Any questions on that? Yeah, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I've got a question. Does the Lone Star tick embed itself in you like the other ticks do, or they just bite you?
They have the same hardware as other ticks, so they have something that they will, what they do, the process is they have a couple devices on their mouth parts. They're like scalpel blades with hooks. So what the ticks do is they make an incision, hook in and pull, and with each tug, it drives that beak of a mouth part down deeper and deeper into you. So, and not only is it fairly long, but it's got recurved barbs like little fish hooks. So that's what makes it so difficult. If you feel a lot of resistance in removing a tick and you feel like you're ripping out your flesh, it's because you are, all right? And not only does it have the little hooks, it actually glues itself in place, all right? So they are amazingly persistent little buggers. All right. Yeah.
Somebody gets bit by a tick, whether it's a child or an adult, how long is that tick dormant in you? There's going to be hundreds of thousands of people out there unknowingly that get bit by a tick in the back, in the leg.
Yeah.
Kids out at recess.
Sure.
All over the country, upstate New York with all the trees and all the pines and oaks and everything, okay?
Your backyard.
Your backyard, anywhere. But how long does that tick stay dormant unknowingly in your body? Does it die off in your body? If you don't know it's there.
When the tick is done feeding, say 5 days from the time it attaches, it secretes an enzyme to dissolve that glue. It backs itself out and drops off. So if it's a nymph, then it's going to become an adult stage tick and wait for its next opportunity. If it's an adult stage tick, like a female, it uses that blood meal to develop its eggs. So they only stay attached to you, say, perhaps for 5 days. Then the show's over. But you probably don't feel the tick bite because they anesthetize you. They anesthetize your nerves. They deaden them. They have special chemicals to do that because in order to be there for 5 days, the worst thing that can happen is if they make a painful bite. So they've adapted over time to like not make its host aware that they are there. And you're right. I mean, they're stealthy. So that's why doing tick checks at the end of the day, especially for kids, is important. What I have here that we'll pass out, these are temporary tick tattoos. And this is a great way to teach kids how to do a tick check because it shows the actual sizes of the different life stages of all 3 tick species. I've used these in some of the school systems, and these are a home run with the kids. I mean, they're putting them on their foreheads, they're putting them on their cheeks, they're cutting out individual ticks and putting them under their eye to go home and freak out mom. So it's been a great device. This is, once again, they're from my colleagues at UMass Amherst, but you're welcome to those at the end of the hour. So let's talk about protection, okay? I talk about repellents a lot with people as a first line defense, and repellents come in a couple different flavors, all right? So you get 2 groups of skin repellents, okay? You get this group here, so products like DEET, and certainly there's a lot of misunderstanding about DEET, you know, that this is dangerous. It damages your nervous system. It'll kill you. It's a carcinogen. This has the most squeaky clean toxicology record that you can think of. So you're not going to become a toxicologist on social media, okay? That's a guarantee. If you want the real skinny on any active ingredient, you go to the National Pesticide Information Center, NPIC, and that is a collaboration with the EPA and Oregon State University. And their website, that's a repository for all the objective data, toxicology research on these different active ingredients. And it's really well presented on their website. It's actually written for people that don't have any particularly technical training or scientific training. So it's a good website. So products like DEET, these are for treating exposed skin. I mean, people tell me that they use this on their clothing, and it's pretty ineffective on clothing, I'll tell you. And there's certain fabrics that this stuff, it will actually dissolve it. This is a great solvent. And then there are alternatives to DEET that are now on the market, products that have the active ingredient picaridin or oil of lemon eucalyptus, and they're all basically equally effective. And then, unfortunately, you get these products that are out there in the market, all natural, okay? Generally, there's some combination of botanical essential oils, and this is an unfortunate group of products because the all-natural label, that resonates with soccer moms and soccer dads, that I'm using something safe and effective on my children. And nothing could be further from the truth. The difference between these two groups, these products over here like DEET and picaridin, they are EPA registered products, meaning if that label says repels ticks for 6 hours, there are data on file at EPA to support that claim. These products are EPA registration exempt, meaning they don't have to provide a single shred of data that they work. So I tell people, parents in particular, if you're using these things on your kids, you're dodging bullets with their lives. And in my business, I have to be as blunt as I need to be because these tick-borne diseases, I mean, you can't go back on some of these. I mean, that's why the title of our extension materials that appears on everything, one bite can change your life. And in the 8 years I've been here, because I came here from agriculture, so when I made a left turn into public health, my eyes became wide open in short order in having conversations with people that have been sick for 10, 20 plus years because they were misdiagnosed at the early onset. So these are fraudulent products, okay? And I wish the Federal Trade Commission would swoop in and blast these things off the market like they're doing with the fraudulent mosquito products and fraudulent bedbug products. So hopefully they're going to get onto the tick stuff soon, or if not immediately. Now there's another repellent that is for treating clothing, okay? And this contains the active ingredient permethrin, okay? And permethrin, it's an amazing product. This is the most effective tool in the box that we have for preventing tick-borne diseases or tick bites. And what I found in my research initially is that if a tick is on a treated fabric surface for 60 seconds, that tick is guaranteed to die. That's a good thing, as Martha would say. And that tick might be dead in 5 minutes. It might take 10 minutes, might take a little bit longer, but the outcome is absolutely certain. I have found this to be amazing when I first started using it. And treating footwear, that is important. So if you treat, fabric like socks and pants, it'll keep its activity through 6 washings or 45 days, whatever comes first. And the biggest problem with this product is that you couldn't find it, all right, even if you knew about it. So in response, I met with all the owners or managers of the major garden centers on the Cape and got them to put this on shelf. And I go do store checks periodically, and I'll go in and I'll talk to the managers, and I'll ask them, I say, okay, how are sales going? And I will tell you, in the last couple of years, they are out of stock more than in stock. So the word is getting out there, and it's making a difference. I got a call from people at the Harvard School of Medicine, okay, or Harvard, and they told me that they were observing that we're the only county in the state where the incidence rate of Lyme is not going up. And at first they couldn't figure out why that is. Every other county is doing one of these. And they discovered that we've had a very aggressive education program here on the Cape for a number of years. Now there's several formulations. The more common ones you see out there are aerosol products, okay? And they certainly do work. The biggest problem I find with these aerosol formulations is they tend to run out of propellant before the container's emptied. And in some cases, you don't get a fine spray. Sometimes it'll foam out of the actuator, and you have to mess around with it. I mean, I did aerosol work for a few years. I used to be a black flag scientist, and so I know I could fix this a few hours in the laboratory. This is my favorite formulation. Home Depot has this, and you can get it online. This is Sawyer. It's a water-based pump spray. So yeah, you just pump this thing until it's empty. And it gives a pretty good spray pattern. I've used this product, and I like it a lot. But if you can't find this, definitely get the aerosol. Use something. Now, you can buy pre-treated clothing, okay? There's a company down in North Carolina. I'm going to toss this your way, all right? There's a company in North Carolina, Insect Shield, and they developed a way to really stick permethrin on the fabric, all right? And that is effective through 70 washings, basically the life of the garment, or 70 washings or 10 years. And I bought those khakis, and I put them on. The first thing I did was I walked into the brush, all right? And this was fall, prime tick season. And I'm kind of laughing because I think I know what's going to happen. And I see ticks attaching to me, and they're starting to climb up. And I looked at them, and after about 30 seconds, they stopped climbing. And you could see them alternating their legs, you know, lifting them up and down, and like they were getting a hot foot, all right? And then I'm watching, and after about another 30 or 40 seconds, they just fell off. It was like a tick water slide. It was amazing. So the other way you can skin this cat is you can send your clothing to Insect Shield, and for a nominal price, like $10 a garment, they'll treat them, mail them back to you within a couple weeks with the 70 washings claim. So it's a pretty good deal. My friend Gabby at Mosquito Control, they did that for their crew's work clothing, and that worked out pretty good. And this past year, Gabby budgeted, and they've outfitted their whole crew, which is about 26 people in the field. They're all have Insect Shield pants and socks. But you got to treat footwear yourself, and I recommend treating footwear about every 4 weeks. All right, any questions on permethrin? This stuff, how many of you use permethrin? All right. Am I going to make some believers out of you? Yeah.
That water-based stuff, you gotta soak it or
No, just till it's visibly damp. Yep. And once you see it's visibly damp, then you just let it dry for an hour or so, and you're good to go. Now, the question comes up because some people who are familiar with this product, because there's permethrin products for your dog, Canine Advantix 2, permethrin, and vets will warn you that it's deadly for cats. Yeah, and cats, if you want to harm a cat, let it get some permethrin. If you want to harm your pooch, feed it chocolate, okay? Everything has a weakness. So it's certainly true. Cats are really sensitive to this active ingredient. But what vets will tell you with the Canine Advantix 2, just keep the dog separate from the cat until it's dry on the back of the neck, and then you can let them go back together and let the cat beat up the dog once again. So for clothing, once it's dry, if you have a cat that's a lap cat, once it's dry, it's perfectly safe for that cat to be in contact with it. All right. We need to protect our pets as well because things like Lyme disease are fairly common in dogs. Ironically, there's a Lyme vaccine for dogs, but not for people. I mean, go figure. And what I found is I'll do events like Pawpalooza that Agway puts on, and I find that people take more time and spend more money to protect their pets than themselves. I'm not sure what's going on. I mean, I'm a dog lover, dog owner, but I protect myself as well. So there's all kinds of good over-the-counter products for pets, but I do recommend up front, if you're going to treat your pet with something for protection from tick-borne diseases, talk to your vet first, because depending on the age of the pet, whether it might be pregnant or nursing, some products might be better than others. Now, Canine Advantix 2 has ruled the roost for a number of years, and this product has been blowing Frontline off the shelf for a number of years. I know this because my wife works at Petco up in Avon. But a few years ago, this product came on the market, a Seresto collar, okay? And this product versus these monthly topicals, once you put this on your animal, you get 8 months of continuous flea and tick control, which is a pretty good deal. Now, if you have a pooch that happens to like to swim a lot, it takes that 8 months down to 5 months, so you have to be mindful of that. The upfront cost of this product might be $65 or so, but if you do the math, it is cheaper in the long run than these monthly topicals. And I've talked to a lot of dog owners that have swapped over from Advantix 2 to the collar, and with the exception of 2 people, everybody is really happy with this product. The only 2 people that had to discontinue it is because the dog's skin showed some sensitivity to the collar. They had an irritation, so they had to stop removal. Now, there are some other things out there. Insect Shield was not to be denied a marketing opportunity. They have a line of permethrin-treated clothing for dogs. So things like vests and neck gaiters. When I saw this market product launch, I know the president of Insect Shield, and when I saw this, I rang him up and I said, "Hey, Jason, you got way too much free time on your hands." Now, there's another company that makes a vest like you guys are wearing here. This is treated with permethrin, and it's for pooches. So I had this sample, and I gave one to one of my colleagues. She walks her dog in Nickerson State Park every single night. Nickerson State Park is tick nirvana, okay? The only other place that's just, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I mean, very high tick population density, very high infection rates. It's only rivaled by the Punkhorn Conservation Area in Harwich and Brewster. Those 2 areas are very, very hot. So Diane's in there every night with her pooch and is always removing ticks from her dog every time they come in. She used this vest and she told me not a single tick on her pooch, which so it from her standpoint works very, very good. So then finally, as a 1-2 punch for this whole thing, I do recommend a perimeter yard spray, okay? I wouldn't rely upon this solely as a technique, but if you do the permethrin-treated clothing and footwear, that alone, you've reduced your chances of getting a tick bite by 90%. But if you want to further reduce risk exposure, consider a perimeter yard spray, because you don't have to go to Nickerson State Park to get a tick bite, all right? We already talked about yards. Surveillance research in Connecticut showed that 2/3 of the people that submitted ticks to them for identification and testing got them from their own backyards. So ticks and gardening go hand in hand. So this is something you can contract a service to do this. Somebody like Fowler & Sons or Bartlett Tree, And the product that I recommend and they use is Telstar. It contains an active ingredient like permethrin, very safe to use. It's not gonna leach into groundwater. It basically, once it hits foliage and soil particles, it's immobilized. And it's going to degrade by soil microbes in about 3 to 4 weeks. So there are other services that you can get, an all-green solution, generally IC3, it's mostly rosemary oil and a few others. The data that have been generated on those type of products show they don't work at all. You might as well be spraying water. If you want to save some money, you can go to a garden center and get a hose end sprayer, okay? And a number of them contain either permethrin or products like that. You just hook it up to your garden hose and you don't have to measure anything, you don't have to dilute anything. You just hook it up to the garden hose and spray. Now, for a lot of this, if you want to have a resource available, including a demonstration we've done on how to do this, I received a grant from Cape Cod Healthcare, and I went into a television studio and I scripted and produced 10 YouTube videos on all aspects of what we've been talking about here for the last 45, 50 minutes. So they're out there. They've already got 3,000 views. I think they came out better than I expected. And I had one, after we uploaded them, I had a guy call me from Dennis, and he said, first of all, he said I was a rock star, all right, which is pretty cool. And then he said he binge watched all 10 videos 3 times, okay? Yeah. So pull up our website, capecodextension.org, make some popcorn, pop a cold one or 2. Butter, of course. Not for me, but definitely yes on the butter. Why, otherwise, why bother? And you get 90 minutes of the Larry Show in 10 different buckets. So enjoy. And always feel free to contact me with any questions at all, and make sure as you are leaving to go home today, you're stopping at some garden center or Home Depot or Dick's Sporting and grab yourself some permethrin, because I think you will benefit greatly. So with that, any questions?
I got one, Larry. Are the tick tubes, are those obsolete now? Should people
Oh,
still
the
be
tick
using them?
tubes. That's a product for yard treatment. They're a cardboard tube that contains cotton balls treated with permethrin. And the idea is that mice will steal the cotton balls, take them down to their burrow, line their nest, and they self-treat. And they certainly make mice tick-free. Do they work? Well, no. They're a waste of money. They're snake oil, actually. And there were 2 really good studies done on that product. Multi-year replicated trials, good science. I read the papers, talked to the researchers, and they told me that they thought they didn't work because mice aren't compelled to steal cotton balls just because they're there, all right? And not all tick-carrying animals steal cotton balls. So chipmunks don't, squirrels don't, rabbits don't, turkeys don't. So unless your yard just has white-footed mice as your animal, and they have an obsession for cotton balls, there's no reason to expect that product to work at all. So the garden centers know my position on this, and if you go to a garden center, you can find that product, but it's generally in the corner of the store on the bottom shelf. So they're not pushing that product anymore. Good question, though. All right. I'm not your supervisor, but I think it's time to get back to work.
All right, everyone give Larry a hand and applause. Oh,
You're welcome.
thanks, Larry.